Okay, in this example we're going to be working towards creating a basic platform game, in this case a Santa oriented game for Christmas, and it should wind up looking something like this, where we've got a character that can go around the screen, have a weapon, maybe some power-ups, and some evil snowmen, who I believe are supposed to be zombie snowmen. Okay, so this will introduce you to Adobe Flash, and we will start off with the drawing tools and the basic workspace. Close that down, and we are going to be creating, in this first example, our Santa graphic. So leave that for now. When you first enter Flash, you should be faced with a screen along these lines. We're going to be working with ActionScript 3, so we click Create New ActionScript 3, and we're faced with this screen. Okay, so some of the things that you will see, you'll see across the top the usual kind of file menu that you get in all programs. We've got the file name there, and the scene that we're in, which is an important area of the screen to pay attention to when you're working with more than one scene. We have the zoom for the stage. Let's set that to 200%. Notice how it gets bigger. So the stage is this big white area. This is the visible screen, and that is set by these properties here. So inside of a properties panel, we have the frame rate. For a game, we'll work at 30 frames per second. The size, in this case, I'm going to set to 1000 by 800 pixels, and I'm going to set the stage background colour here to be a grey kind of colour, so that I can make out my drawings relatively easily. Now, some of the other things you'll come across. Next to the properties, we've got the library tab. Everything we create will be stored inside of this library, which is currently empty. And down here we have got and inside of the timeline, this is where we hold frames, and if we were animating, we would use frames to give our graphics a representation across time. Okay, and this is how layers are organised as well, so we can create new layers or delete layers, and they work similar to how you'd expect them to do, say for instance in a program like Photoshop. Okay, so on the far right hand side we've got the toolbar. With the toolbar we can leave it as it is, or we can drag it out into the centre or across to the left hand side. What you can actually do is, if you grab the grey tab, you can pin it to any area inside of the program. When you hover over specific anchor points, you'll notice a blue line appears. I could put it there, for instance. I can make that smaller in width, so it's like that. And I prefer it to be out of the way, so I'm going to leave it to the right hand side for now. Inside of here we've got the selection tool, which we use for moving objects, sometimes for changing the shape of objects. A little bit lower we've got a transform tool, which we'll probably use to resize and rotate objects. A little bit further down we've got the shape tool. If we click and hold there, we can see the rectangle tool and the oval tool. These are the two main tools that we're going to be concentrating on to start off with. A little lower than that we've got the pen and pencil tool, and in this example we'll be using the brush tool, which is used to paint what are known as fills, and we've also got a fill bucket. We'll be using that, and we'll be using the palettes. So we've got the fill colours, our stroke colours, which are associated with the pencil, and we've got a colour palette up at the top here, which we can use to select colours from as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm going to create a circle or an oval, and the fill color I'll choose to be something a little bit along the lines of a fleshy colour, and then I'll select the outline to have no outline. So I click on that, and there we go, no outline is represented. And it's just a case of left click and drag to create a shape. in this current stage I'm going to create something remotely similar to a head shape, or more like an egg, and then using the selection tool I'm going to hover over the object, and when you hover over you get a slightly different cursor. So hovering over the edge I can drag this down so I can make it a little bit flatter across the top, and then I might move the chin, so hover over the bottom edge and just change the pro forma of that shape a little bit, maybe even do that a little bit. Okay, so it looks a little bit more like the side view of a head, maybe even if it's a strange colour. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the brush tool. So I'll select the brush and I'm going to choose a nice big red colour, and I'm going to attempt to create a hat. So that will come from about halfway down the rear of the head, and it will come across the top of the forehead and roughly follow the shape line, and then I'll drop it down here and then back up like that. And once we've done that, we can use the bucket tool to fill in the areas we've just coloured. Then back to the brush tool, I'm going to use the white colour. Towards the bottom we've got the brush size here, which I'm going to change to be slightly bigger, and we've got the brush shape. I'm going to keep it as a circle for now. And what you'll notice is that when you are zoomed out, the brush becomes bigger relative to the size of the stage, and therefore whilst you only have a few brush sizes, by using zoom you can actually create the effects that you desire. So I'm just going to go around the edge of the hat, show you familiar with how this works out, and then I'm going to add a bit of a beard. I'm just going to do that with a little circular motion, fluffing around like that, and it gives us something similar to a shape of Santa's head. For the purposes of this game, that is how it will look. I'm then going to choose a darkish colour, just make a little eye-shaped dot. I might change this to be a different shape brush in this case. Maybe even make it a little bit bigger, so it's nice and visible. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the selection tool, and what you can do is you can click and drag what is known as a marquee around an object, and it will select everything inside of that square that I've just created. And I'm now going to make this into now what's a graphic symbol. What I'm going to do is quite a lot with our objects. So I'm going to convert to symbol by right clicking and then choosing convert to symbol, and I'm going to make sure that this is set as a graphic, and I'm just going to call this one head. Okay. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to try to draw something along the lines of a body. So I'm going to go back to the red colour, I'm going to change the brush back to a circle, and I'm going to draw roughly in the area of the neck, down from the almost vertical, maybe coming in a bit to roughly where the waist will be. I'm going to give a little bit of a podgy belly so it sticks out a bit there and comes back in again. Join that together, and you'll notice that it's disappeared underneath the head. Now if it's all joined together, I can now fill that using the bucket tool, and that is going to be the body shape. I might just amend it a little bit further. There we go. And then with the selection tool I will select that shape, right click, convert to symbol, and I'll call that body. Okay, that's another graphic. You notice that once I've done that, it's actually appeared above the head. If I actually want to do it, to right click, choose arrange, and I can send this backwards and it will disappear below the object that's above it. And to achieve this, I'm going to need a new layer. I'm going to create a new layer for a second to work over the top. I'm going to choose my brush and choose a colour, using the colour wheel that's in a similar kind of area to the red that I've always been using, but make it a little bit darker. Okay, I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to draw some kind of arm-like outline. And then I'll with the previous red colour, and I'm going to give it a little hand using the face colour. That's be a little semicircle that sticks out from it. In fact, taking that back a step, what I want to do is I want to change the mode of the brush at that point before I do that. So I will, with the brush selected, go to the bottom of the tools panel, and there's a thing called brush mode. If I click and hold that down, I'm actually going to paint behind. What that means is that when I paint over something, it actually only paints behind that object as opposed to on top of it. I'll then change the brush mode back to normal, and I'll be selecting the hand at the same time to make an arm symbol. And the way I would do that is to click on one segment, then shift click another, and shift click another one, right click that, convert to symbol, and I'll call that my arm. Now, slightly different to the rest of our symbols, I want to make sure that something known as a registration point is in a specific place. So when I've created a symbol, it's its own entity. From the library we can drag and drop as many copies of that as we need to. But if we double click on an instance, which is a copy of a symbol on the stage, we enter the main timeline. This is the place where all of them are defined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag everything all at once. What I'm looking for is this crosshair here to be positioned roughly where I might want the arm to rotate from. So in which case that would be roughly around the shoulder joint. And if I go back to the main timeline by double clicking in a space outside, or by clicking on the scene 1 button at the top left of the screen, form tool, how it rotates around that point in comparison to the head, which has got a center point, and rotates like that. Okay, so with the selection tool I'm going to put that back where it was, and maybe just rotate it up a little bit. There we go. The next thing I'm going to do is create the leg and foot, and I think I'm going to have a green colour for that. So using the brush, I'll get a dark green for the outline, and there will do. And just get something like a leg, making sure that I join both ends together. I can then fill it with the bucket tool, choose a slightly lighter green, and I might just draw over the top of that. With a darker colour again, just give some kind of shape and form, and then we'll be using the brush tool, this time with a black colour, and maybe to to create something along the lines of boots. These will be quite comical boots. And there we go. So there's some comedy boots, which we'll then fill with the bucket tool. There we go. And selecting all of that together, so by clicking and then shift clicking and shift clicking all the objects that we want to select, I can convert them to a symbol. I'll call that leg. I'm going to double click on that symbol. Its rotation point is a little bit higher up the leg, and then I'll reposition that under the body by positioning it where I want it to. Right click, arrange, and then send backwards, and again till it's underneath the body. Now, of course, because these want a separate layer, I just need to put them on different layers, but I'm going to do it later on. For now, I'm just going to put everything on the same layer again. So I will select and then cut. Layer 1 I will paste in place, and then with the leg, arrange, send backwards, puts it underneath the body. There we go. There is our Santa object. Now we might just want to select the body and the head and rotate them slightly forwards, because it did look like it was leaning back a little bit. There we go. And there is our Santa. Okay, so in the next video we will create our snowman, and we'll also create Santa's flamethrower.